A flight feels like the safest way to travel until the unthinkable happens. From lone survivors of deadly crashes,
I woke up to this eerie sounds of the jungle.
to passengers stepping up when the cockpit goes silent. Some moments in the sky are so shocking they refuse to be forgotten.
Hang on!
Tighten your seatbelts and hold your hearts for the most unbelievable real-life flight stories ever caught.
Get him, Andy, I got the airplane.
The plane was sinking. There was no one around. It was freezing cold, and there was nowhere to go.
It's wild to think that something as small as birds could bring down a massive commercial airliner. But that's exactly what happened with U.S. Airways Flight 1549 in January 2009. Just minutes after taking off from LaGuardia Airport, the plane flew straight into a flock of geese, knocking out both engines. With 150 passengers on board and nowhere safe to land, Captain Chesley Sully Sullenberger made a split-second decision: ditch the plane in the Hudson River, and he pulled it off flawlessly. As freezing water started to seep into the aircraft, passengers scrambled onto the wings, waiting to be rescued. Thanks to quick-thinking crew members and nearby boats, everyone survived. To this day, it's known as the Miracle on the Hudson, and proof that sometimes real-life heroes don't wear capes. They wear pilot uniforms. Miraculous crash.
It really became strange because the engine performance increased when I reduced the throttle.
Scandinavian Airlines Flight 751 took off from Stockholm on a freezing December morning in 1991, and for about a minute, everything seemed fine. Then, ice that had built up on the wings broke loose and got sucked straight into both engines.
The right engine just went down.
Not ideal. Suddenly, the plane lost power. No thrust, no backup plan, just 129 people and a whole lot of bad luck. But the pilots were absolute pros. They managed to glide the aircraft down, weaving between trees before belly landing in a snowy field. The impact was rough. Wings broke off, the plane split in three, but miraculously, everyone on board survived. A commercial jet, 2 failed engines, and 0 casualties. That's the kind of survival story you don't hear every day. Skyjacker D.B. Cooper.
This is for you.
Northwest Orient. Flight 305 was supposed to be a routine 30-minute trip, but D.B. Cooper had other plans. On that November evening in 1971, a man dressed like a businessman, mirrored sunglasses, a suit, and a briefcase took his seat at the back. Then came the note. He calmly handed it to a flight attendant. "I have a bomb." What followed was a textbook ransom demand. $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, and a refueled plane. When the FBI met his demands in Seattle, he let the passengers go, keeping only the crew. Then, somewhere over the Pacific Northwest, he did the impossible. He opened the rear stairway and jumped into the stormy night, vanishing without a trace. No confirmed body, no clear suspect. Just a legend that still haunts the FBI to this day. Annette Herfkens.
Your dad was arranging your funeral, and now you're here.
Not every plane disaster has a miracle ending. Take Vietnam Airlines Flight 474 in 1992. What was supposed to be a quick, 55-minute flight to a coastal town turned into a nightmare. Annette Herfkens, a Dutch banker, boarded the plane with her fiancé, excited for their holiday. But just 5 minutes before landing, the plane flew too low during bad weather, clipped trees along Oka Mountain, and crashed deep into the jungle. Annette was the sole survivor. She spent 8 days alone in the wilderness, surviving on nothing but rainwater, battling injuries, hunger, and the sheer isolation of the jungle before being rescued. Years later, she turned her unimaginable ordeal into a book, proving that even from tragedy, resilience and strength can shine
I
through.
woke up to this eerie sounds of the jungle.
Asiana Flight 214.
Hang on!
Asiana Flight 214 was just moments from touching down in San Francisco when something fell off. Frequent flyer Ben Levy glanced out the window and realized they were way too low. But with all the technology on board, what could go wrong? The plane hit the ground hard, the tail breaking off on impact. Inside, passengers braced themselves, alarms blaring as an engine caught fire. Smoke filled the cabin, but there was no time to panic. Levy rushed to the exit. Crumpled wreckage formed a makeshift staircase. One by one, passengers climbed down, helping each other as firefighters battled the flames. The airport's runway 28L had become an emergency zone, but thanks to quick thinking and teamwork, survivors made it to safety.
Help each other. Come on.
Water landing.
Ocean.
1 minute, it's just another flight. The next, alarms are blaring, and the plane is spiraling toward the ocean. This is the story of a small passenger plane bound for Hawaii back in 2014. Despite the nightmare scenario, the passengers stayed shockingly calm. The moment the aircraft hit the water, it started filling up fast. People scrambled for the exits, gripping onto anything they could. And through it all, one passenger, Fernand Fent, kept his camera rolling. 3 intense minutes of survival. Water rising, people escaping, time stretching into forever. Later, watching the footage, it was almost eerie. No screaming, no panic, just focus. A tragedy, yes, but also a testament to human instinct. How, even in the scariest moments, people can pull together and make it out.
And everything that you remembered in your past, your loved ones and everything, this.
FedEx Flight 705.
I never lost consciousness, but I lost useful consciousness for at least 45 seconds.
FedEx Flight 705 was on what should have been a routine cargo run until chaos erupted midair. A former employee, hidden among the cargo, launched a surprise takeover with a shocking plan in mind. But what he didn't count on was the sheer determination of the crew. Despite being badly hurt, the pilots turned the aircraft into a battlefield of physics, executing extreme aerial maneuvers usually reserved for fighter jets. Barrel rolls, sharp dives, anything to keep the attacker off balance. Against all odds, they fought through the struggle, regaining control of the plane and steering it back to safety. By the time they touched down, they hadn't just saved their own lives. They had rewritten the rules of what's possible in an airborne crisis.
I had already figured out that what I had in my hands is probably one of the best weapons available, and that was the aircraft.
Autumn Veach.
Plane crash survivor Autumn Veach is sharing new details of her harrowing escape.
16-year-old Autumn Veach was on a small plane with her grandparents when things went horribly wrong. 1 second, they were flying. Next, they were surrounded by blinding white. Then trees, then fire. And just like that, she was alone in the middle of nowhere. No supplies, no sense of direction, just instinct. And luckily, she had plenty of that. She remembered survival shows she used to watch with her dad, Follow the Water. So she did. Through thick forest, over rocky terrain, cold, exhausted, but moving. 2 days. 2 entire days before she finally reached a highway near Mazama, Washington. Rescuers couldn't believe it. A teenager surviving all that, totally on her own? Autumn Veach didn't just make it out. She fought her way back to safety.
I was positive I was going to die, and then I was positive I was going to live.
Toronto plane crash.
Started wobbling and sliding sideways. And that's when I knew we were in trouble.
Landing should be the easy part, right? You touch down, grab your bags, and head home. But for the passengers of Delta Flight 4819, things took a horrifying turn in Toronto. Instead of a smooth landing, the plane lost control, spun 360 degrees, and ended up upside down. Imagine that. 1 moment, you're buckled in, expecting solid ground. The next, you're dangling, heart pounding, wondering if this is it. Miraculously, all 80 passengers survived. But for those on board, it wasn't just another flight. It was a brush with disaster they'll never forget.
I'm doing all right. My back is a little sore, but other than that, I'm...
Boeing 737.
We lost power on the engines.
I've got nothing.
Our aviation history is full of miracle landings, but this one is easily one of the most shocking. A Boeing 737 mid-descent was caught in a nasty thunderstorm, leaving both of its engines non-functional. No power, no second chances. Just a levee in the middle of nowhere, and a pilot with one eye making the call of a lifetime. Captain Carlos Dardano didn't just land the plane, he pulled off a move usually meant for tiny gliders, a side slip, to line it up perfectly. With rain pounding down and cement walls ahead, there was barely any space to stop. And yet, the landing was so smooth, passengers laughed in relief. A jet, dead engines, and a perfect touchdown. That's the kind of story that makes you believe in miracles. Passenger turned pilot.
I knew it was a life or death situation. Either you do what you have to do to control the situation or you're going to die. And that's what I did.
Not everyone leaves their fate in the hands of chance. Some take control when it matters most. Take Darren Harrison, a passenger who went from fisherman to hero in a matter of minutes. He was flying home from a fishing trip in the Bahamas when the pilot of their Cessna 208 Caravan suddenly passed out mid-flight. With no one else to fly the plane, panic could have easily taken over, but Harrison kept his cool. He radioed air traffic control and with zero flight experience, followed their step-by-step instructions to land the plane safely at Palm Beach International Airport. Talk about a high-stakes situation. Thanks to his quick thinking, everyone walked away unharmed. A true real-life action movie moment. Uni Air Flight 873. Some landings are routine, others turn into a race against time. Uni Air Flight 873 was right on schedule, approaching Hualien Airport in Taiwan. But as the first officer struggled with the descent, the captain took over, bringing the plane down safely. Everything seemed fine, until it wasn't. A sudden explosion rocked the cabin, with power out and panic rising. Every second mattered. The crew fought to keep order as terrified passengers rushed to escape. By the time firefighters contained the blaze, the aircraft was a charred wreck. Miraculously, every single passenger had made it out alive. It was a narrow escape, and the investigation would soon reveal just how close they came to a far worse outcome. Copycat hijacker.
500,000 this time. He jumped out of a plane. He survived.
D.B. Cooper may have pulled off the most famous skyjacking in history, but just a few months later, someone else tried the exact same thing, only with a much less mysterious ending. Richard McCoy, a former Army pilot and Vietnam veteran, hijacked a United Airlines flight, demanded a ransom, and parachuted out mid-air, just like Cooper. But McCoy made a crucial mistake. He left behind too many clues. Authorities tracked him down within days, arresting him at his home in Utah. While some believe McCoy was Cooper, the evidence suggests he was just an imitator. Unlike Cooper, whose fate remains unknown, McCoy's escape attempt ultimately landed him behind bars, proving just how legendary Cooper's vanishing act really was.
I don't think I've ever seen anybody look much more like a sketch.
Smoky takeoff.
They had just taken off when the cabin filled with thick smoke. You can see it right there in the images.
Delta Airlines Flight 876 had barely left the ground when things took a turn. Passengers settling in for the flight suddenly noticed a hazy smoke creeping through the cabin. No alarms blared, but it was the unmistakable smell of something burning. The pilots wasted no time. Declaring an emergency, they turned the plane around, making a swift return to Atlanta. As soon as the wheels touched down, the crew sprang into action, deploying emergency slides for a rapid evacuation. Within minutes, all 99 passengers and crew were safely outside, shaken but unharmed.
People was on the plane saying, "Smoke, smoke, smoke," yelling. I guess the flight attendant got on the mic and was like, guys, we're aware that it's smoking. We're trying to get in touch with the pilot.
Cecilia Kitchen. On August 16, 1987, Northwest Flight 255 took off from Detroit Metro Airport, heading for Phoenix. Moments later, something went terribly wrong. The aircraft never gained altitude, coming down near Middle Belt Road. Among the chaos and wreckage, a single voice. A faint moan led first responders to 4-year-old Cecilia Kitchen. She was the lone survivor, a little girl who somehow made it through what should have been impossible. Over the years, her family protected her privacy, allowing her to grow up away from the spotlight. But as an adult, Cecilia chose to share her story, not for attention, but to connect with others who had faced similar tragedies. Now she's part of a rare group of soul survivors, showing the world that even after unimaginable hardship, life can still move forward.
Soul Survivor Project is more about a group, and that's why I'm willing to.
Close call.
Of another close call at a major city airport, fueling fears among travelers.
A Southwest flight was all set to land at Chicago Midway when a private jet decided to roll onto the runway without permission. Air traffic control told them to stop, but apparently that didn't happen fast enough. The Southwest pilots, with reflexes of absolute pros, pulled up at the last second, avoiding a disaster by just 2,000 feet. Honestly, these close calls are piling up. Smoke-filled cabins, emergency landings, runway mix-ups. It's enough to make any passenger a little jumpy. Aviation experts are saying human error is playing a bigger role, and weirdly, it's not just happening in the air. Taxiing, takeoffs, landings, those boring parts of flying? Yeah, turns out they're becoming the real high-stakes moments.
What was happening? Yeah. I'm already pretty nervous to fly right now.
Longest hijacking. What started as a routine flight turned into an unexpected world tour when Lufthansa Flight 181 was hijacked midair. The hijackers forced the pilots to make stops in Italy, Cyprus, Somalia, and Yemen as they negotiated their demands. To onlookers, it almost seemed like they were treating the hijacking as an all-expenses-paid trip, hopping from one destination to the next. But their journey came to an abrupt end in Mogadishu, where German special forces executed a daring rescue operation. In a dramatic nighttime raid, they stormed the plane and freed the passengers, bringing this airborne odyssey to a close. Weirdest hijacking. Japan Airlines Flight 351 started as an ordinary domestic flight, but ended up as a piece of Cold War history. Mid-flight, members of the Red Army faction, young radicals chasing a revolutionary dream, took over the plane, demanding to be flown to what they saw as a utopian society, North Korea. Once there, they were received not as criminals, but as honored guests. Meanwhile, the passengers and crew, caught in the middle of this political drama, were eventually sent home unharmed. But the hijackers, they disappeared into the shadows of North Korea, living under the regime's watchful eye for decades. Some eventually reappeared, still holding on to the ideology that had led them to vanish in the first place. Smoky flight. Delta passengers had barely settled in when their cabin turned into a smoky scene. Flight 876 had just taken off from Atlanta, bound for South Carolina, when a thick haze started creeping through the cabin. The pilots acted fast, turning the plane around for an emergency landing. Meanwhile, flight attendants told passengers to breathe through their clothes. Not exactly the kind of in-flight tip anyone expects. When they finally touched down, everyone slid to safety via inflatable slides. No injuries reported. This was Delta's second smoke-related scare that week. Just days earlier, another flight had to return to LA because of smoke in the galley. Mysterious plane incident.
I'm getting the off, and there's a reason why I'm getting the off.
A video recorded on a plane instantly went viral, and for good reason. A lady on a plane was shown freaking out about something. She claimed that the passenger sitting next to her was not real. While we don't know who or what the person was, netizens started cooking up wild theories, suggesting she might have encountered a shapeshifter, while others argued that the woman was seeing things. Later, in an interview, she revealed that someone had stolen her AirPods, causing her to panic like that, but people remained unconvinced, speculating that she had been purposefully silenced.
That back there is not real.
CanJet Flight 918.
When we get off the airplane, And I says, I'm not leaving unless the passenger gets off.
So CanJet Flight 918 was on the tarmac in Jamaica, passengers probably daydreaming about their next vacation stop, when suddenly some guy decided this plane was his ticket to a whole new life, and not in the I'm moving to Europe to find myself kind of way. He wanted asylum, and this was his big plan. Now this could have gone sideways real fast, but credit where it's due, negotiators handled it like pros. After some tense hours, the guy finally gave up, and everyone walked away safe and sound. No wild Hollywood stunts, no disaster. Just a whole plane full of people with one heck of a story to tell at dinner parties.
Gun came off Gary and swung to me, and the shot was fired.
Selfie with hijacker.
The latest on that Egypt Air hijacker and the photo that is sparking a firestorm.
Egypt Air Flight 181 was cruising from Alexandria to Cairo when suddenly a man on board claimed he had an explosive belt and demanded to be flown to Cyprus. For hours, tension ran high as authorities negotiated. Passengers sat frozen, unsure of their fate, and then the hijacker surrendered without harm. Officials later discovered his belt was a fake. Everyone walked away safely. But here's where it gets weird. One passenger, Ben Innes, decided this was the perfect time for a selfie. Yep, he walked up, grinned next to the hijacker, and snapped a photo. He thought if he blew them up, it wouldn't matter anyway. The internet lost it. Some called it reckless, others dubbed it legendary. Either way, this hijacking ended with 0 casualties and one very controversial selfie.
You want to take a photo with him? I will take a photo.
Bahia Bakari.
Non, je me sentais pas bien. Je sais pas, j'avais un mauvais pressentiment.
On June 30th, 2009, Yemenia Flight 626 was making its final approach to the Comoros when things took a devastating turn. Among the passengers was 12-year-old Bahia Bakari traveling with her mother. Moments later, the plane went down into the Indian Ocean. Somehow, Bahia survived. With no life vest and barely knowing how to swim, she clung to a piece of debris in the dark waters for over 9 hours, waiting, hoping. Rescue crews eventually found her, weak but alive, making her the sole survivor of the crash. Years later, she shared her experience in a memoir, proving that even in the face of the impossible, strength can emerge in the most unexpected ways.
Tout l'avion, il avait atterri aux Comores et que moi, j'étais sortie.
Emergency landing. On September 12, 2023, Ural Airlines Flight 1383 was cruising along like any other flight from Sochi to Omsk when things took a turn. The pilots reported hydraulic issues, and suddenly, landing at the airport wasn't an option. So, where do you put down an Airbus A320 in a pinch? Apparently, a cornfield. With nerves of steel, the crew guided the plane to a smooth landing right in the middle of the field. No runway, no problem. And the wildest part? Every single one of the 165 people on board walked away without a scratch. If this is not a textbook emergency landing, I don't know what is. Vesna Vulovic.
Vesna Vulovic's story for me is one of the most incredible survival stories.
That day, Jet Flight 367 was cruising high above Czechoslovakia when disaster struck. A mid-air explosion tore the plane apart, sending flight attendant Vesna Vulovic plummeting from 33,000 feet. Miraculously, she survived the impossible fall, trapped in part of the wreckage that crashed into a snowy hillside. Rescuers found her injured, but alive. The sole survivor, she spent weeks in a coma, recovering from her injuries, and later became a national icon. Her astonishing survival earned her a Guinness World Record for enduring the highest fall without a parachute. Even decades later, her story remains one of the most incredible tales of resilience in aviation history.
Because of the bomb broken into bits, people blown out of the plane. She, however, seemed to have been trapped at the rear of the aircraft.
Volaris hijacking.
hasta San Diego porque un lugar donde se sentía seguro.
Volaris Flight 421 took off like any other routine trip from Leon to Tijuana on December 7th, 2024, until chaos broke out midair. A passenger attempted to hijack the plane, demanding it be diverted to the United States. But the quick-thinking crew and passengers weren't about to let that happen. They subdued the individual, keeping everyone safe until the plane made an emergency landing in Guadalajara. There were no injuries, just a tense moment that could have ended much worse. Goes to show that sometimes the real heroes are the ones sitting right next to you at 30,000 feet.
Muchas de las personas cuando bajamos se sentían pálidas, se sentían queriendo.
Forgot to land.
Just have to verify that cockpit is secure.
It is secure. We got distracted.
Northwest Airlines Flight 188 wasn't a crash, a hijacking, or even a mechanical failure. It was two pilots getting way too into their laptops and straight up forgetting to land. Back in 2009, this Airbus A320 was supposed to go from San Diego to Minneapolis, but instead of touching down, it just kept flying. For 90 minutes, air traffic control, dispatchers, and even military jets tried to reach the pilots. Nothing. The plane overshot its destination by 150 miles before the pilots finally snapped out of it. Their excuse was a heated discussion about company policy, but the reality was they were deep in their personal laptops, reviewing schedules. The FAA wasted no time yanking their licenses.
Brief explanation on what happened.
Just cockpit distraction. That's all I can say.
Pilot turned hijacker.
Details on that attempted hijacking in mid-air overnight.
Ethiopian Airlines Flight 702 wasn't your typical hijacking because the hijacker was the co-pilot. Mid-flight to Rome in 2014, the captain took a bathroom break, and that's when the co-pilot made his move. He locked the door, took control of the plane, and calmly rerouted it to Switzerland. Then, like he was ordering room service, he radioed air traffic control and asked for political asylum. The passengers were completely unaware they'd just been part of a one-man hijacking until they landed in Geneva. No threats, no weapons, just a guy using a literal plane to flee his home country. Swiss authorities arrested him. But hey, as far as hijackings go, this one was oddly polite.
Authorities are questioning the Ethiopian co-pilot.
SAF Flight 139. Not all hijackers are legendary. Some are like this guy. Imagine sitting on a flight flipping through the in-flight magazine when some guy stands up and says, "I need to talk to the Prime Minister." Yeah, not the flight attendant, not the pilot. The actual Prime Minister of Norway. That's exactly what happened on Brothen's Safe Flight 139 back in '85. One lone guy hijacked a Boeing 737, demanding a chat with the country's top officials. Bold move. Now, most hijackings don't exactly have happy endings, but this one, no one got hurt. After hours of negotiations, the guy just gave up. For a hijacking, that's about as low stakes as it gets. Flight 206. Garuda, Indonesia. Flight 206 turned into a high-stakes standoff when 5 men took control of the aircraft, making bold demands. In a move straight out of an action thriller, a specialized team arrived at the scene, disguised as airline mechanics. Timing their entrance perfectly, they swiftly took control of the situation with expert precision. Before most passengers even understood what was happening, the ordeal was over, and the flight was secure once again. It was a rescue so seamless that for many on board, it felt like nothing more than a strange delay, until they learned just how close they had come to history in the making. Divine hijacking.
Anunciar que viene un terremoto como nunca ha habido otro.
This hijacking tale is straight out of a thriller, except it actually happened. Jose Flores, a Bolivian preacher with a troubled past, claimed he had received a divine vision warning of a disaster. The date, September 9th, 09, was, according to him, the satanic number 666 flipped upside down. Convinced that Mexico was in danger, he hijacked the plane using a juice can disguised as a bomb, demanding to speak with the president. The pilots, keeping their cool, tricked him into thinking they were following his orders, while authorities prepared a response. After a tense standoff, Flores released the women and children moments before masked police swarmed the aircraft. When questioned, he revealed his accomplices were none other than the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. No passengers were harmed, and the bizarre ordeal ended with his arrest. Animals on board? Not all hijackers are human. Imagine settling into your seat, ready for a smooth flight, when suddenly there's a snake loose on the plane. No, this isn't a movie. This actually happened on an Aeromexico flight, and let's just say passengers were not thrilled about their unexpected travel companion. The snake, casually slithering through the cabin, turned a routine flight into a full-blown thriller. Thankfully, the pilots kept their cool, landing in Mexico City just 10 minutes later. As soon as they touched down, Animal Control swooped in like a real-life rescue squad, wrangling the reptile and restoring some much-needed sanity. No one was hurt, except maybe a few nerves. Halfway through a 15-hour Air India flight from India to the US, a bat started flapping through the cabin. Not exactly the in-flight entertainment anyone signed up for. Passengers were already exhausted when chaos broke out. The bat, an Indian flying fox, which fun fact is huge, swooped around like it owned the place. People panicked, the crew jumped into action, and the whole scene felt straight out of a horror movie. The pilots didn't take chances. They made an emergency landing. No one was hurt, the bat was safely removed, and the flight eventually carried on. But seriously, how does a bat even get on a plane? Emergency exit. Few things can send a jolt of panic through a plane like someone yanking open the emergency exit mid-flight. That's exactly what happened on an Asiana Airlines flight from Jeju Island to Daegu in 2024. Just minutes before landing, a man seated near the exit decided, for reasons unknown, to pull the door handle while the plane was still in the air. A sudden rush of wind blasted through the cabin, sending passengers into a frenzy. Flight attendants acted fast, and despite the chaos, the pilots managed to land safely. No serious injuries were reported, but the reckless passenger was swiftly taken into custody. As for why he did it, that's still up for debate. Rare sight. Flying isn't always daunting. Sometimes it's your front row ticket to once-in-a-lifetime moments like this. Do you see it? A tiny speck in the sky, but it's there. A lucky passenger flying over Sweden caught a meteor streaking toward Earth, all from a window seat. Seeing a falling meteor is rare enough, but spotting one from thousands of feet in the air, that's straight up miraculous. And hey, good thing it was far away from the plane, because that would have been a whole different kind of story. Shaking plane.
The whole plane was just gonna go plummeting down.
2 hours of non-stop shaking at 30,000 feet. If that doesn't test your nerves, nothing will. An Air Asia X flight heading to Malaysia turned into a nightmare when passengers heard a loud bang mid-air. Turns out part of the engine had vanished. What followed was a ride so rough, people said it felt like being trapped in a washing machine. And just when everyone was clinging to whatever hope they had left, the pilot got on the intercom and asked them to pray. Twice. Cue the life jackets, the tears, and a whole lot of panic. Emergency crews were on standby for a possible water landing, but thankfully, the plane made it back to Australia in one piece. Thank you very much for watching the video. Do like and share it with your friends. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to not miss any of the upcoming amazing videos. Thank you once again.